Hello, and welcome to our fourth annual OST Conference, The Power of You. My name is Jamie Cole, and I'm the training specialist for JWB, and I will be your event MC. Like last year, we are using the WebEx platform, and we have fun challenges for you. If you haven't already, you can download the WebEx app on your mobile device to participate. You can find it through the Google Play or the Apple Store and look for WebEx events as opposed to WebEx meetings. You will see challenge words pop up throughout the conference live stream and in the features on the app. You'll accumulate points, and if you submit those words in the challenge feature, you might have a chance to win a prize at the very end. So looks like many of you are already on the app, and if you have successfully connected, your challenge word is enter. So go ahead and put that in so you can get some points. All right, moving along to our features. If you haven't already, take a moment to look to the left of your screen and check out the great features we're offering. We have all of the speakers' bios. We have the agenda. You can download important resources and activities, and you can post on the social wall, which I've seen some of you do already, and of course, compete in challenges. Today, we will hear from subject matter experts and have the chance to ask questions using the chat feature on the right of your screen. When we talk about the power of you, we mean the special talents you have or your superpowers. Those things that you're inherently good at. Maybe it's motivating, listening, inspiring, or laughing. The list is endless. I thought about what mine is, and I landed on kindness because no act of kindness is ever wasted. All right, so let's take a minute for everyone to share your superpowers in the chat. Comment and on each other's superpowers, and let's see what we got. I can look them up, so put your superpower in the chat. All right. To show how much we appreciate the amazing work you do and the superpowers you share, we sent each of you a Power of You swag bag filled with lots of great things. I'm sure you're wearing some of the swag now. They're awesome, right? I'm wearing my bandana as a headband. All right, so let's take that swag on over to the social wall and post a photo of yourself or your team this morning showing off your swag. So I'm going to look on my mobile device and I'm going to see what swag we got. Looking good. Love the backpacks. Okay, so the top 3 leaders in the challenges will win great prizes. The top one will receive a prize for all of the staff at their site. Winners will be announced at the end of today's event, so stay tuned. It's almost time for me to sign off, but before I go, I want to give a big shout out to our ASL interpreters. Thank you so much for being with us today. It's now my pleasure to introduce the CEO of JWB, Beth Houghton, who will kick off our power-packed morning.
Good morning, and welcome to our 4th annual OST Conference. We're honored to host this professional development and staff appreciation event once again. JWB recognizes and celebrates the difference each of you makes in the lives of Pinellas County youth. This year's theme, The Power of You, is about tapping into your personal strengths and talents and channeling these for the good of kids in your programs. As Jamie mentioned, we have an amazing lineup of speakers who will share practical ideas for family engagement, often offer techniques to manage youth behavior, and discuss strategies for your own self-care, something we often put on the back shelf. We will also be discussing how your strengths and talents, your superpowers, set you apart, make you unique, and contribute to the important work that you do with kids. I believe one of my superpowers is vision. Not X-ray vision like Superman, but the ability to envision and guide the work of JWB and our partners, like you, so all children in our county have the opportunity to learn, succeed, and thrive. Today, we have over 600 superheroes from around the county participating, another record year. It's a time set aside for you to refresh and reflect. You'll hear inspirational stories, be able to ask questions, and are encouraged to share your ideas online. So keep those cell phones handy. Just as superheroes are ordinary people in disguise, every day is an opportunity disguised as a challenge. To help you rise to that challenge and celebrate the power of you, we filled this year's swag bags with items we hope you'll love, selected with you in mind. On behalf of all of us at JWB, I want to personally thank each of you for rising to challenges every day while continuing to make a difference in the lives of children who truly are our future. Now let's kick off our super day with keynote speaker Liz Wooten-Reschke. Liz is the president and CEO of Connect for More, an author and former teacher, and a mom of 2 young kids. Liz will share her superpower, along with ways we can control narratives and write our own stories using the power of words.
Good morning. When I was a little girl, my mom would correct my sentences mid-speech. She couldn't help it. She was an English teacher. She taught me from a very early age the power of words, the influence they have in our lives, the influence they have in our actions, how they can sometimes create the most wonderful days and create days that ruin us. Imagine my own surprise when my own child taught me that very same lesson just 40 years later. Allow me to paint the picture. It is Mother's Day weekend. It's a Friday, shortly after school is let out. Only a few short months ago. My son is 11, soon to be turning 12. He is about to enter middle school. And unfortunately for me, he's also about to ruin my day. How many words do you think it takes to ruin a day? My son did it in 2. 2 words. 2 tiny little words, less than the total length of my birth name, screamed at me in my own house on Mother's Day weekend. Now, I don't know how many of you have kids out there, but this is not exactly a hallmark moment for me. In fact, it's probably one I'd like to forget. But it just so happens that it's the very first time I've heard the words, "You suck," from my son. You see, as a former teacher and coach, I've been called just about every name in the book, both to my face and behind my back. But it happens, right? When you choose to show up from a place of discipline and empathy. It happens when we won't let them off the hook for their own personal responsibility. It happens when we believe in them more than they believe in themselves. But if I'm being honest, this moment with my son, my first thought looks something like this. You see, it's a well-known family fact. We Wootens do not genuinely gather virtue and patience together. And in adding in my own traumas and lived experiences, I've learned that my triggers are quick and my reactions sometimes not the best version of myself. But as with so many moments in motherhood, in service with youth, I get to choose how I show up in this moment. And in these next few moments, I'm going to ask you to join me in doing the same thing. So today, I'm going to share a few lessons that I've learned from that experience with my son that have left an impression with me and left an indelible mark in the way that I show up as a leader in this world. We'll be spending some time and energy focusing on 3 skills while looking at and all around choosing our legacy with our words. The first I will share with you will be breathe and reset. The second I've learned is assuming positive intent. And the third, practicing conscious integrity. Each 3 of these will have an opportunity to help us decide what legacy we wish to leave. So I'm going to be inviting you to participate in the conversation one of 2 ways. We do, of course, have the chat, as Jamie referenced, but we also have the use of Mentimeter. So what I'd like to give you an opportunity to do is to take your cell phones, pull those up, and you can either scan the QR code and join us in the conversation. You can go onto menti.com and cue in this 8-digit code, or you can use the direct link that you've been provided as well. So let's test our tech. As always, make sure things work out the way we plan. Did you know that according to research, we have 10 thoughts every second? I want to test our tech and get you all to share what you're thinking right now. We've got a few I'm tireds. Hungry, same, thank you. What else are you thinking? We're tired, we're hungry. Need more coffee, yes. Always an opportunity, right? Great, so I see several of you are logging on. Oh, I miss my daughter, yes. College game day. Feel like I have more than that every second. Yes, your child, you're hungry, all the things I need to do. Yes, I think it's harder and harder each and every day for us to put that to-do list aside. So thank you all for sharing that as we go in. Weekend plans, as well as kind of all of the things that we want to show up for today. So thank you for those of you who are sharing your thoughts and where we are today. It's a great kind of test as we go into the first concept. So before we start with the skills that we want to build our legacy, we want to begin with the concept of legacy. So some of you may just be starting off in your careers. Others of you may be in career transition. Some of you may be well-worn veterans in this world of OST care. Wherever you are on your leadership journey, you are bound to leave a legacy behind. It's likely that you're leaving a legacy without you even recognizing it. So some remembrance of you is left post your service with the children that you serve, especially if you're in direct contact each and every day. So I want you to think about the kind of legacy you want to lead. Please choose the statement from the following list that best fits the legacy you wish to leave. By the time you leave service, do you want to make a positive difference in a child's life? Do you want to begin a career of service? Are you preparing to be a good parent through some of the work that you're doing now? Are you preparing for valuable work skills? Are you learning important life skills? I'm not surprised to see that this group so far is really focused on making a positive difference in a child's life. And as we think about our legacy of service, we also then must think about our words and how they impact those that we serve and how they impact us. So as we move into this work, I want you to think about the following. I want you to imagine a child in your program, one that you find hard to deal with. Whether that child infuriates you or frustrates you or disappoints you with their behavior, or even sometimes makes you sad. I want you to bring yourself to a time when that child said something really mean or harsh. And I want you to share what those feelings come up for you. So when we're thinking about these children, and we're thinking about the way that they show up, it's curious to me and very heartwarming to see that these children, these so-called difficult kids, bring you joy. They bring you encouragement. Some of them worry you. Some of you know that they're special. Some of you reference happiness. So wherever we are for the feelings of this particular child, I want you to keep that child in your mind's eye, in your heart and mind, as we move into the skills that we're going to be practicing today. The first skill set that I want to talk to you about is breathe and reset. And I know oftentimes we tell our kids, take a deep breath before you react, or at least I do. There are a lot of times in our lives when we have the chance to react first and think second. There are also times in our lives where we have to make split decisions for safety reasons. But there are also just as many that we need to pause. So I want you to join me in this moment of pausing. Again, think of that child that you were just thinking of a few moments ago. And I want you to breathe in peace and release any frustration you feel with that child. I want you to breathe in patience and let go of control. I want you to breathe in kindness and let go of judgment. You know, I would love to tell you that my only superpower is empathy, but I also have to admit that one of my superpowers is judgment. It's so easy for us to jump into judgment of others. And it's often easier when we're in a position such as an adult and a child, and in a power dynamic, a parent and a child, where we have the opportunity, where we need to pause and check ourselves. So according to the University of Virginia, showing up and slowing down our emotions this way, just by breathing, as we just did, is a way for us to have more control over any situation put in front of us. It allows us to acknowledge how we are feeling, which matters, and it allows us to better regulate our emotions before we act next, and before we say something we can't take back. So the second skill that I want to share with you is one that comes from Dr. Brene Brown. Now you're going to see a PSA from her and her work later this morning, but I want to share with you this concept of living big. It is an acronym, and the B stands for boundaries, the I for integrity, and the G for generosity. In large part, my work in going against my judgment superpower is fueled by this exercise I'm about to take you into. So in short, the question is, what boundaries would I need to put in place with this child so that I could allow them the generosity that they need to bloom and still be in my own integrity? So this idea of living big isn't about showing up in perfection. It's not showing up even as the best version of ourselves. It's acknowledging that we have boundaries. It's acknowledging that we have generosity. And it also acknowledges that we have integrity and want to maintain that. It's also based on the idea that everyone is doing the very best they can. We have no control over how anyone reacts. And in many cases, we have no control over the circumstances the children in our programs are experiencing outside of our doors. But we do have control over our own actions and our assumptions. So how might this assumption change your behavior? If we assume that everyone is doing the best they can, how might that change your behavior? The third skill that I want to share with you is this idea of conscious integrity. And I found this many, many years ago, probably about 2 decades now, when my mom sent me a daily word, which was a prayer book for my particular denomination. And there was a phrase that struck with me, and it was the joy of conscious integrity. And whenever times have gotten hard or difficult for me, I always try to remember that my integrity is my legacy. It's taking the opportunity to know that we're going to make mistakes, to be kind to ourselves when we do. It also means that we are probably going to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing at times. But joy of conscious integrity and practicing it is not fake it till you make it. It is show up in your authentic self and take pride in who you are and who you are becoming. It also means that we're making a commitment to doing our best for the children in our care and letting our best be enough. Because when we do either of those, we get back to the practice of standing in our own integrity. So we are able to establish our ground rules of what is okay and what is not, that living be and big. We're tuned in to our own self-awareness and personality. That's part of our integrity, that I. And we're committed to serving others and giving of ourselves. And that's the generosity of spirit. So many of you have already shared. So I want you, as we think about our 3 skill sets, to be reminded that sometimes it is as simple as breathing and resetting, as simple as making an assumption of positive intent, even if it's hard, and to practice your conscious integrity with intention. So I've thought about this for a few months to be true. I tried to figure out what bothered me most about what my son said to me. In 2 words, my child, my firstborn, said the thing to me that I often say to myself. See, I would love to tell you that I speak to myself with kindness. I would love to tell you that I don't speak to myself that same nasty, negative way that I've heard from him or from others. But the truth is that my inner critic is one of the meanest people I know. She is the queen of questioning my worthiness. She is the harshest judgment of all. And she is the soonest person to throw me under the bus of shame when I make a mistake. Now, my son may never remember that he spoke these words. He certainly doesn't see this as the first time that he did or recognize the significance of when he said these words to me. But it hurt. He hurt. And it's something that I still internalize to this day. So as I close our skill building, I want us to focus on considering the stories that your critic is telling yourself. What kind of narratives are you taking into consideration? And I'm going to ask you to be thinking about the statement, I should. And I'm going to be encouraging you to do something I rarely do in a large setting. And that is to should all over yourself. I'm going to take a few moments with you to share a few of those should statements that are in my head, and also give you space for the stories that you're telling yourself. So when we think about the stories that we're telling ourselves, those I should be statements, what are they? I must not make mistakes. I have to be perfect. I should be patient at all times. What are some of those stories that you're telling yourself? So some of my go-to stories include that wrestle with perfection. They include that I should be further along in my career. They include that I should be making more money. They include that I have to be the best. So the stories that we're telling ourselves often create well-worn roads in our brains and in our hearts. So the stories that we are telling ourselves in this group is that you should give yourself more grace. I should be a better version of myself every day. I have to stay in this position for my family. Find the energy. I have to be more prepared. I should get some munchkins for my coworkers. Maybe for your keynote speaker too. I should be strong. You know, it's no surprise to me that so many of you who are working day to day with children have all of this range of emotions, both of positive self-talk and story and challenges with perfectionism and being a human that can show up sometimes not at our best. So the important part of the story piece is this. It's about the way that we rewrite our stories that matters most. Because I'll tell you again, with my superpower of judgment, making sure that we have a judgment, whether it's snap or long, well-worn intention, that we take a moment to pause and rewrite those stories that don't serve us. So I'll give you examples of how I have rewritten some of my own stories and narratives, and I want to give you a chance as well. I have to be on time, right? I should always be on time. I prefer to be on time, right? Many of you have the pleasure of driving in or around Tampa Bay and know how being on time sometimes is completely out of our control. So I prefer to be on time, and we all do our best. It is important for me to do a good job. That is my rewritten story of I have to be perfect, because it matters to me when I work with children. It matters to me when I work with leaders. And it matters to me when I'm working in the nonprofit sector on behalf of others. I'm failing is the rewritten story for this statement. Even I have limits and need help. And sometimes that's the hardest statement to make. And you're going to hear from my fellow speaker, Herbie, a little bit more about that later this morning. But saying even I have limits and need help is one of the most courageous and powerful statements and stories you can ever rewrite. I don't have the patience for this. This is the rewritten story for that. I'm uncomfortable with how long this takes. I do a lot of work in planning. I do a lot of work with teams. And very rarely do we have folks that get along 100%. Do we all agree on the same thing? And do we all see the way to get it done in very clear steps? Things take time. Change takes time, just as growth. I must not fail. Here is the written narrative for that, is that I like to help others as much as I can. But that also comes from understanding that the only way that I can help others is if I am also fueling my own tank, taking care of my own self, so that I can be in a space of generosity with those that I serve. But yes, I don't want to fail, but I can and do like to help others as much as I can. I should never make a mistake. This work is important to many people. Your work is important to many people. That burden, particularly in working directly with youth, oftentimes comes to you to make it happen. And sometimes those decisions are made outside of our control. Our children's environments happen beyond our walls. But this work is important to many people, and you are allowed to make mistakes and learn from them. So I want you to think about some of those perhaps negative statements or stories that you were telling yourself. And at your comfort level, I want you to share with the group here and rewrite that statement. I want you to choose just one in this season, just one that you're willing to take this season of your life or this season of the year and rewrite in a way that creates a legacy we can observe, that you can lean into these narratives and share what you're really saying to yourself. To set up an intention to change the negative stories that you're telling yourself and create more healthy pathways to your success. And to stop ultimately shoulding all over yourself and better define the legacy that you want to leave and the leadership journey that you want to live. So thank you for those of you who were courageous enough to share your story here and rewrite. I love the idea of I can make small efforts daily. There's a well-worn phrase of Rome was not built in a day. Neither were successful human beings. So I encourage you to take those small steps for success and do the best you can each and every day. I will have grace with myself and others. I love that one. Focused on give yourself grace just as much as you would a friend or one of the students in your program. And I am enough. Wow, imagine what the world would be. Imagine what our programs would be if our children could say that very same statement. I am enough. I want to say thank you for taking this sometimes difficult journey. My friend Rachel calls it brutal and beautiful. Because believe it or not, this is researched work. This is work that tells us that our brains cognitively repeat the things, sometimes negative, that we have said to ourselves, that our words and actions sometimes become crowded or shrouded by that negativity that we share with others. And it's about making meaning of our lived experiences now so that we can determine what our legacy will be. So consider as we close, what will your newly written story be? What will your legacy be? So again, thank you so much for sharing your time and your energy with me. Thank you for those of you courageous enough to share your stories online with us. It takes a ton of courage to share with virtual strangers. But I hope that it points out to you that we are not alone. And before I conclude my talk, I want to make one more point. Because the truth is, you might not be ready to rewrite your story. You might be in a really rough season. Maybe you're not ready to acknowledge the negative things that you say to yourself. Maybe you're in a season of life where every day feels like a challenge. It's okay. This work is intentionally labeled a practice. It's a conditioning. It takes time. And when you fall off the practice, you come back to the practice. Because though it is painful sometimes, it is necessary work. I have spent the greater part of the last 10 years fighting the fact that this work is necessary. But I can tell you from experience that it is valuable, it is meaningful, and it encompasses powerful words that mean a legacy worth living. But even I have to pause sometimes. Sometimes we do let words overpower us. Sometimes we do let words ruin our day. Sometimes we let others ruin our day. But we ultimately create those stories of our legacy, whether we mean to or not. So I encourage you today to take back control of your legacy. Take back the power of you and your words. The stories that we tell ourselves not only impact our lives, they impact the lives of the children that we serve. They carve those pathways in our hearts and in our minds, and we then put them into experience. So let's keep rewriting. Let's keep practicing. Let's keep encouraging our children to do the very same thing. Because at the end of the day, the story that I hope you will always tell yourself is this story on the screen. You rock. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your dedication to our communities. As a parent, I can tell you that I would not be able to work without so many of you available to help share and be part of my own village. Thank you for your continued service to our committee. Thank you for our continued service to our children and communities. But above all, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much, Liz. That was an incredible message. It's a reminder that we all have the power to rewrite our stories. We have 15 minutes for questions. So if you have a question for Liz, please put it in the chat right now. I just have to say we don't see the chat in the back end like we planned. So I'm going to use my phone to look up questions that you guys are putting in the chat, but I'll kick it off with a question or two to begin.
Great. Go for it.
So Liz, in what ways have you seen words work well for influencing others and not as a teacher, coach, and parent?
That's a great question. So I'll start with, remember, judge, it's my superpower, Jamie. I'll start with the negative first. I have found as a parent, and I actually see this as a coach as well, what I say to one person, like if I speak to my daughter who's 9, it's not the same message that she receives as my 11-year-old, even if it's the exact same words. Mm-hmm. There are filters that people hear, and it's also part of our lived experience together. So I find that, and the joke in my house is that I am a public speaker, a professional speaker, and in my own house, no one listens to me. So I think filter matters. But I also think once you know that, you can make sure that the presence of when you're speaking to someone is in their frame of reference. I also think in understanding the way they work. For example, I know my son, like some of my clients, there have to be one-on-one conversations in closed rooms.
Yeah.
For others, my daughter in particular, she loves performing. So if we can have some sort of audience related to it, there's an enjoyment of that for her. And as a teacher, I think we all have an influence regardless. So I think understanding that it's sometimes better for me to say less than more, particularly when I'm maybe not in my best frame of mind.
I love that. That's very important to remember, especially considering how you may be in that moment too.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to the next question. When you've had a bad day or mindset, how do you get out of your funk and keep going with positivity and hope?
The joke is that I go back to bed. The reality is, it's not that easy, is it? The reality is what we call a reset in my family. So a very specific instance as a parent, trying to get everybody moving and grooving, and we got to get out of the house certain time. For us, there'll be moments where I feel like a warden of, on the clock, on the time. There are some times when I've lost my cool or my temper. And then we've had to, in the car, do exactly what I shared with the group of we just have to breathe, reset, and say, okay, from this moment forward, we have the opportunity to choose how today goes. And after I've apologized for snarkiness on my part, and the children may or may not have apologized for their own behavior, depending on the need for it, we move forward. But, when it comes to professionally, I find it sometimes harder to put aside your funk because you have to show up, right? You have to show up and be as present as you can for your kids. You have, the kids that you serve, you have to be present for clients or your boss. And so I think it's also about finding cultures and employment opportunities that support authenticity and support you as a human being. I hope more of that has happened since 2020. But I also think it's being able to know that, here in this space, I can be myself. I can say, I'm having a tough day. Can you take care of this group for me and give me a minute? Or, I need to cry uncle for a minute. I need a $5, right? I need somebody to put me in timeout. And I think that's important as well. When you have a bad day or mindset, to remember that it's very much like a wave, right? It comes in, and if we let it stay in, it can flood us and keep us flooded. But if we let it go away, it can go away. A bad day or a bad mindset, most of the time, isn't permanently with us unless we choose to let it stay.
That's right. We have a lot of power over our mindset. And I like to say that it's never too late to make the day great.
Oh, I like that. It's got some alliteration in there too. Some former English teacher love. I love it.
All right. One more question from me. What do you want your legacy to be, and how do you get to that point of knowing it?
Wow. I'll be honest. I am in my mid-40s, and I am currently redefining my upcoming legacy. I had a trajectory and a path that I thought was where I wanted to go, and I have accomplished much of it, or some of it, depending. I've also had a lot of other things happen along the way. Becoming a caregiver for my mom before I turned 30, going through a divorce, having to figure out how to co-parent. And I think, legacy, as I've shared with you, is how we define it. And after the last probably 3 or 4 years of post-pandemic or emerging pandemic, I just feel tired. So finding the time for me, and for me, finding rejuvenation is with a book or journaling or yoga or quiet without any human beings around. just really thinking on what I want my legacy to be. But I recognize that over the last 4 decades, it takes time for me to decide what I want to be and kind of who I want to show up as. But I will also say, now that I am in this kind of mid-age season of life, as my husband likes to call it, I don't agree with that statement, but I'll leave that there. Having the ability to really say, you know what, I don't have to throw everything out. There are actually a lot of things that I've built up as a legacy: generosity, service, affirming worth in others. I've been doing that since I was a teacher. So having the ability to take what really has worked for me and then craft that into a new legacy has been really exciting for me. And a lot of that has been leaning on mentors, leaning into friendships and conversations to decide who my people are. You know, not everybody are my people, and I'm okay with that, but finding those people that fill you up, that bring your joy. It's what Brene Brown calls your square squad, those that you trust, those that you enjoy working with, and those that fill your life with positivity and creativity.
Oh, yes. Anyone who can fill your life with positivity should be staying.
Yes.
All right. So we have some questions in the chat.
Sure.
Donna McGill asked, how would you suggest controlling the need to please everyone?
You read right into my soul.
Right.
I am definitely, well, I was raised to be a people pleaser. I was raised to be a yes person. I was raised to believe that perfect attendance and perfect A's was the minimum. That said, I won't say I've outgrown it. I've done a lot of work, both within therapy and without, to be able to lean into where are those feelings coming from? You know, is it something that was implanted to, from parents? Is it something that came from, fear of abandonment? Where did those come from? And really doing some of the hard work on that, the brutal work, so to speak. But just as before, I think once you start to understand and become more self-aware, you can then decide and ask the question, how is this serving me? Because although I say I am a recovering perfectionist, my drive and my motivation is sometimes driven by that, right? We have to get it right. We've got to be perfect, etc. So it is creating the, I almost call it the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, right? You've got the perceptively negative, you have to be right, everything has to be perfect. And then you also have, but how can that fuel my success? How can that fuel my legacy? And it's, I wish it was a one and done. I'm still doing this. I sensed actually about this presentation, and Jamie can say this, even though I've offered this type of topic before, finding myself, because I'm tired, I've been sick in the last week, that I'm in this mode of everything has to be perfect. So we go back into those old patterns very quickly. But we also have, we also can create accountability partners. So friends or family or husband or spouses or partners that will check us on that. But we have to give those people permission to do that. Mm-hmm. And you also have to give yourself permission to, I have little reminders all around my desk of like, just enough, in time, all these little kind of visual reminders to me that the work that I do is important, but it's not always urgent. And so just making sure that we take the time to do the work when the work needs to get done, as opposed to when we think it needs to get done.
Yes, that's great advice, Liz. Thank you. Okay, one more question. Someone asked what your superpower is, and that is self-awareness. Yeah. And a lot of what she's been talking about leads back to being self-aware and how to pivot from there. Okay, so how do you help a friend who tends to focus on the negative How could you change their narrative?
That's a great question. I would also love to say that I'm not struggling with the same issue. So I think I'll offer my consultant answer here, and I'll say it depends. It depends on your friendship. It depends on the level of trust that you have with that person, the level of courageous conversations you have with that individual. It also may depend on their circumstances. You know, I have a really good friend who lost her father unexpectedly, and she was in no mood or no mindset to change a thing. She was just holding on. And so I think it comes back to, again, self-awareness. What can I do in this situation? And it may mean that we've got to shore up our boundaries in that friendship on what is okay and what is not okay. Like, it is okay for you to reach out when you need me. It is not okay to call me in the middle of the night, you know, for example. But I also think self-awareness comes to acknowledging that you don't necessarily have I won't even say not necessarily, you don't have the ability to change someone else's mentality. You can only influence their work. And it's the same with the children that we work with, right? So it's the opportunity to say, maybe very authentically, I care about you. I'm concerned about you. How can I support you?
I love that. Those are 3 important statements that you can make to someone, and it could open up a bigger conversation for sure. Okay. We do have time for one more.
Okay. Do I get to answer my favorite donut question?
Yeah.
I actually don't have a favorite donut. My favorite donut is the one that nobody else has taken a bite out of or has beaten through, because we're a donut loving family, and I don't usually get the first donut. So that's my favorite donut. No, seriously. What's the last question, Jane?
Okay. It is, let's see, where did it go? I'm sorry.
Okay. Now I'm thinking donuts. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. And this might be, you know, it might be repetitive, but how to be happy when your personal life could be in shambles.
So let me offer a challenge question. Who said we have to be happy when our life is in shambles?
Preach. Yeah.
I mean, who says?
Yeah.
And I think, you know, my own life has been in shambles a few times, admittedly, and I probably feel like that too, or felt like that at times, that I have to be happy. But who says? I don't think you have to be happy. And when you're in crisis, I also think, as someone who works with kids or has kids, that, you know, they're allowed to feel how they feel. They don't even have to know why they feel how they feel. They just, our ground rules, or you just can't take that out on other people. So in the interim of that, you've got to figure out, you know, you either have to sit with your feelings or self-regulate in ways that make sense to you. You know, but also know that being in that moment and being unhappy doesn't mean that you're an unhappy person. It also can mean that you're just in an unhappy or challenging season. And I like to think of it like a season that, you know, seasons change. And I don't have to be stuck like this. And I don't have to be unhappy forever. But right now, yeah, I'm going to throw a pity party, table of 1. And I'm going to, you know, wrap myself in my weighted blanket with my hoodie and my dog. So, you know, I think that also to me is self-care sometimes. Being able to say, you know what, I am not, and my family unfortunately knows this phrase very well, I am not fit for human consumption today.
That's silly.
Yeah, you know, or I'm not there yet. You know, a lot of decisions need to be made. And I think it's okay to not be there yet. I think it's okay to not be happy. Happy is a range of emotions. It is not the only emotion that we have access to.
Thank you, Liz. I love the analogy of that, you know, your emotions could be just here for a season, and then the next season might be better.
Yeah.
So if we can block off our emotions like that, we can help ourselves to carry on.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for joining us today and sharing with us how words hold so much power and how we can change our own stories. We really appreciate you and your time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, let's keep things going with our next discussion. We have a panel titled, What is Your Superpower? Our panel moderator is an OST provider and real-life superhero, Sandy Clayton. Sandy has worked with Parks and Recreations for 35 years. Among her many roles, Sandy is involved in community wellness and designing and implementing youth recreation programs such as summer camps, aquatic programs, and sports leagues. It's my pleasure to introduce to the virtual stage the super Sandy Clayton.
Thank you, Jamie. It's my pleasure to moderate this panel because it's on a topic that is near and dear to my heart, keeping kids and their caregivers happy and healthy in mind, body, and spirit. I'd like to keep the conversation free-flowing and we'll be asking our panelists questions, but I also invite you, our audience, to participate by submitting your questions in the chat feature on the right of your screen. We will do our best to get to as many of the questions as possible over the next hour. Also, if you have a specific question for a specific panelist, please put their name in the chat. So, as Jamie mentioned, we have 3 very experienced speakers on this panel: Janielle McCullough, Alana-Maria Luczak, and Zaneta Ellison. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but be sure to check out their bios on the platform. Janielle, why don't you start us off?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Janielle McCullough, and I am the Staff Development Educator at Evara Health. I've been in the field for many years. Prior to coming to Evara Health, I worked 16 years with the Department of Juvenile Justice, working in the residential lockdown facilities. My superpower is patience. I do believe that it's something that's very important, and it has assisted me throughout my career with being successful reaching our clients.
Awesome. All right, Alana.
Hi, everybody. My name is Alana-Maria. Apologies in advance. I'm feeling a little bit under the weather, so my voice might be going in and out, but I have a nice hot cup of tea here to keep me on track. I am a recent graduate from USF last year, fall of 2022. I pursued my Bachelors of Social Work. So I graduated my Bachelor's of Social Work, and I'm looking to pursue my master's and to later become a licensed social worker. Outside of my credentials, I like to say I'm a person with a lived experience with a mental health condition. So my goal in a lot of my practice and things that I do is to find the matrimony and the balance between my professional methods and my peer-led methods. So I have a huge passion for serving youth and young adults with mental health conditions, but also a huge passion for being an advocate and educating people about mental health and the realities of that. My superpower is resilience, and I've been always taught in me, and it's something that I pride myself in, that I can adapt, I can change, and I can bounce back. And in irony, my goal is to use my voice to share my story and to help others share their stories too.
And our third panelist, Zaneta.
Good morning. I had to check to make sure it was still morning. Good morning. My name is Zaneta Ellison. I am a licensed mental health counselor and the owner and operator of New Vision Behavioral Health Incorporated. New Vision Behavioral Health, we are centered in a few locations. St. Petersburg is our main office. We are also in Tampa off of East Henry Avenue. And we will be expanding to the Clearwater CRA. So I'm so excited about the expansion of our practice. What we do is we provide mental health and addiction services to all ages. However, we specialize in serving youth and working with youth-related disorders. My superpower is an influencer. I feel as if I influence change, wellness, and recovery in others.
Awesome. So the title for our session is, What is Your Superpower? We picked this because we want you to tap into your special talents when working with kids. That can only happen when we take care of ourselves too. So we will also talk a bit about self-care and boundaries. I will ask questions about managing kids' behavior and some about how to deliver an effective program. So let's start with something we all have experienced in the past, how to work with challenging kids. So the first question is going to Zaneta. What do you do if you have a child who simply does not want to engage in activities? He or she is withdrawing from the group and being difficult. You are frustrated. What should you do?
I mean, I would first, take into consideration the situation. Is this a child who this is their normal behavior to not engage with other students? Is this just kind of their normal behavior to withdraw? That's their personality, so to speak. If it is, then we don't want to shame or guilt that child for who they are or how they show up, but we want to find effective ways to include them into activities, to get peers to circle around them and maybe support them, but not out of their comfort zone or out of their interpersonal ability. We want to encourage cohesiveness. Now, if this is a child that is normally engaging, is normally present, but you notice they're just a little off or disconnected, that could be a sign that something is going on or has happened in that child's life. Sometimes a child that has recently experienced a trauma will show up the next day and be totally disconnected from the classroom, unable to focus, unable to be present, unable to concentrate, or just may have behaviors to where they act out. That is a telltale sign that something is happening, and it's an opportunity for you as a teacher or the support staff in that classroom to intervene, pull that child aside, maybe find a way to get some background information from the parent, caregiver, or whoever is connected to that family or that student to see what's really going on. So that way you can handle and address the situation appropriately and not consequentially.
Great. Any of our other panelists want to jump in on that question?
She hit the nail on the head.
Absolutely.
She's good. All right. Our second question. How can you de-escalate situations when working with kids of different ages? For example, 6 and under, 7 through 9, and 10 to 12. And this question is going to Janielle.
Well, the first thing that I say is most important when working with children and trying to de-escalate them is rapport. You have to have rapport with that child. And I agree with what Zaneta said. First thing you want to do is pull them aside. You don't want to embarrass that child and find out what's going on. There are different ways to address behavior without addressing behavior. If you have many of your students on task and you see one that is off task, you could simply address that behavior by thanking all of the students that are on task. Thank you for everyone that is following instructions. I appreciate you. Because that child could be acting out to get attention. And without giving them that attention and giving the attention to the ones who are doing positive, they will want to receive that attention as well. And then a lot of times they will fall in line. If you don't have a rapport with that child, I would encourage tapping out and finding someone that could reach that child so that we can get class back on time.
Great suggestions. Anyone else?
I would like to add to what Janielle said. I like how she mentioned to not basically single that child out, but still acknowledge the behavior that is the most desirable in the classroom without, again, pointing that child out. But I think it's also important. Most likely, you all have students who have trauma experience. And so good trauma-informed care for teachers is when de-escalating situations to not re-traumatize that child by yelling, screaming, being physical, meaning not physical, hitting the child, but maybe even using your hands to de-escalate the situation, or putting your hands on them, touching them could be simply triggering for some children. So being calm, allowing the situation to be a teachable moment. Say if there is a conflict that happened, to where the classroom gets to get involved and say, what just happened here? What are ways that we can avoid this? What are ways that we can support whoever is involved in the conflict? So allowing it to be a restorative situation to where we allow it to be a teachable moment versus, again, a consequential situation. And then I say, more importantly, it's important for us to stay regulated when we are trying to de-escalate situations. I can't de-escalate if I'm all over the place emotionally. So you being able to stay in calm mind and calm body is really important while de-escalating problematic behavior.
Excellent. And I like what you said about making sure you know the child and not being afraid to tap out, because there's those kids that you just cannot connect with, but other people seem to. So that's great advice.
That's good.
All right. The third question we have is for Alana. And it is, kids are coming to school or to camps clearly upset or anxious because of what they see on the news, be it the hurricanes, school shootings, etc. How do you talk to kids about these situations in a way that will calm them down?
So when I was thinking about this question, it really brought me back to a lot of the stuff that I've learned through not only social work, but primarily through peer experience and peer training. So I almost think of an action plan when it comes to situations like this, and creating a somewhat of a process that gives a guideline to people on what they should do and how they follow. So for a situation like this, I feel like the first thing to do, that is a commonality that both Janielle and Zaneta shared, is finding a safe space, pulling them aside, finding some quiet, comfortable. You know, with younger youth, it might be, let's go to the beanbag chair. With somebody older, it might be removing them from the classroom and going somewhere more formal. So knowing your audience, knowing your child and what's a safe space for them, or even asking, where would you like to go to talk? Or, you know, giving opportunity back to the youth. When talking to them, I think it's important to ask them open-ended questions. What have you seen? How are you feeling? Allow them to express themselves and their thoughts. Listen actively. I know it can be common sometimes when you're talking to youth, or if there's a disconnect, to dart your eyes, fix your glasses, fidget with your face. As part of human behavior, when you do those things, you are inadvertently creating a disconnect and a distrust sometimes that the youth may perceive as. So I think it's always important to listen actively to them. And then something that has been consistently amongst the other questions we have talking about is age appropriateness. So the right level of information that you may want to disclose or talk about with them. Things with a younger youth versus an older, there's going to be different things that your conversation will consist of. Wrapping up and going back is emphasizing safety, letting them know you were correct in coming to me. I can be a safe person for you. These are the safe spaces that you can go to in your life. And then something I think is really important is to empower them. Introduce them to the aspects of how to cope with these emotions, you know, drawing, writing. A more artistic child may like to sing, music, journal. All those things are something that you should be able to encourage them, to empower them and bring some hope in. And, you know, and by bringing hope, you can highlight helpers, you know, with things like hurricanes, school shooting, etc. Point out the heroes in the situation, first responders, volunteers, people to instill hope in their community so they can have that sense of hope and empowerment and lifting. And end all be all of that, offer support, normalize their feelings, let them know they're not alone and where they're coming from is not an abnormality. And many other people go through those things, but your emotions are special though too.
Awesome. Anyone else want to jump in?
No.
Okay. So this is a question for all of you. What powers or skills do you think today's youth need to succeed as adults?
Sorry.
No, I'm saying that's a good question. Go ahead.
I would say resilience, the ability to face and manage tough situations, tough emotions, and get through it in a healthy way, and allow it to be an experience for them to build off of versus destroy or pull from them.
I agree with Zaneta. I was going to say resilience as well. But however, I think a superpower that children will need to have in order to succeed as adults is also understanding. because they will have to understand the individuals who they may interact with may have some trauma they have not dealt with yet, and they have to be understanding and patient when interacting with those other individuals, so that they don't automatically write them off when they do something they don't like, and just be able to give individuals grace when they are going through something.
Yeah, I love that, Janielle. One of the biggest things I noticed trying to support youth is having empathy and regard for each other, you know, to be sensitive to other people's needs. That's good.
I agree with Zaneta and Janielle. I feel like we're all on the same wavelength right now, but really bringing back in what Liz was saying earlier and tying into understanding and resilience is having that self-awareness. Yeah. You know, when your youth has that self-awareness, you're promoting a bunch of things: how to regulate your emotion, conflict resolution, empathy, decision-making, resilience. All these things can be deep-rooted from a sense of self-awareness, which can ultimately, translating into their adult life, can make them emotionally intelligent and self-assured and confident kids.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Amazing. All right, we're going to shift now to some adult or caregiver-focused questions. So, Zaneta, what advice do you have about working with kids and their families to set good boundaries to prevent burnout?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say self-preservation is very important when we're working in this field, working with students and families. And what that means is having the courage and the wisdom to be able to know when we are stepping outside of our abilities and our expectations and our assigned duties or positions is vital to our mental, emotional, and professional health. So it's important for us to see the value of taking care of ourselves in and outside of our job. I understand firsthand how when we're working with children and families, how we can be extremely tolerant, patient, compassionate, and empathetic to the lives of the families we serve. And because of that, we can be vulnerable to be pulled into the temptation to want to go beyond our capacity to support, serve, or show up in unhealthy ways or beyond our capacity. So how do we work through this? I would say realize that it is normal to want to jump in for these students and families. It's that heart of yours that most likely drove you to your position or your profession anyway. And so we want to honor that passion. Realize too, it is okay to say no to things that are out of your scope of work or out of your abilities. It doesn't make you a bad or unprofessional person. It doesn't make you incompetent. It actually makes you wise. It may be more appropriate to ask for help or assign a task to someone else or to someone who's more appropriate to handle that situation. Check in with yourself. If your efforts are coming from an unhealthy place, and what I mean by that is driven by a desire to feel needed, validated, or valued, you will most likely find yourself burnt out or resentful. So do a self-check. Ask yourself, what is driving me to do these things that I've been doing for other people or for my families? If it's driven by something that is because of a need or it falls within your job requirements and your natural abilities, then most likely it's okay to proceed. And then when we check in with ourselves, look at how you've been showing up, right? How have you been feeling, responding, sleeping, thinking, speaking? How have you been showing up in the classroom or at work or even at home? Our bodies do a good job of telling us or giving us clues when things are not okay, when we need to slow down, when we need to relax, or when we need to disconnect. And so it's important for us to pay attention to those telltale signs of burnout, or that we're about to roll in an unhealthy season if we don't address things that we've been doing. And so when we do our check-in, don't bring guilt or shame. Just realize, you know what, I've been doing the most lately, and maybe it's time for me to back out, or realize that this isn't what I need to be doing, but pay attention and focus more on the things that you are assigned to or within your capacity to do.
Great advice. Janielle or Zaneta, do you have anything to add?
No.
Okay, so our next question is, and this is a great one because this could help prevent a lot of the behavior at the beginning. So what are some of the big warning signs or trends in kids that indicate that they may be going through a mental health crisis? And this is for Alana. I'm sorry.
Yes. No worries. Yeah, and I think these are really important too, because I am a big preacher of prevention if you can, to avoid intervention. So for me, a lot of like these things are very important for you to keep an eye out and really know your youth and your children and your audience, and you can, so if you can identify behaviors. There's a lot of commonality through younger age to older age, and some warning signs and trends. But a basic being behavioral changes, shift in behavior, mood. Are they becoming more irritable? Are they withdrawn? Are they excessively moody? That's a big one, is the shift in behavior. If you're talking in terms of the classroom, decline in academic performance, a noticeable drop. Everyone has a bad day, a bad test. I know me as a student, I've been there, done that. But when you see there's an increased stress and emotional struggle attached, and there's a consistent timeline of a noticeable difference, that's something to keep an eye on and be aware of. As well as social withdrawal too. Is this student typically always engaged, enjoy expressing their happiness and emotions with other youth that they're surrounding for? Are they now disconnecting and having a feeling and a sense of loneliness? That's a big trend in behavior to look for. Changing in sleeping patterns. You have students who are falling asleep in class, not really able to give their full attention, sleeping excessively, just being disengaged is something that you might know that there might be something going on in that student's personal life. Appetite change, sudden weight gain, weight loss, this can be more consistent amongst older range, but younger as well. So that's something I think is important to keep an eye out for. A lot of physicality, the looks of the student, is there decreased, attention to their hygiene, different things like that. And then shifting into an emotional sense, like I said earlier, mood swings, difficulty concentrating, expressing maybe feelings of hopelessness. Maybe the student may not outright say, I'm feeling hopeless, I'm feeling helpless, I'm lonely, I'm feeling these specific ways, I'm having suicidal ideations. Those are the blunt things. But that's why it's important to know your youth and to be engaged with them, so you can see that maybe those expressions and those feelings are demonstrated differently than being verbatim, word for word, that they're feeling that. But just to reiterate again, early intervention can make a huge difference, and it's important to pay attention to these warning signs and trends.
Great. Anyone else? All right, kind of dovetailing off of that question, Janielle, can you provide tips for incorporating mental health education into daily programming?
Sure. One of the things that I encourage that all professionals pay attention to is, one, understanding trauma and the different types of trauma. And then after we understand that trauma, being trauma informed, because we have to understand that we cannot communicate with each child the same way. If a child is going through something, we have to, instead of asking them what's wrong, we have to ask them what happened. A lot of times they want to be heard. And we have to, we mentioned it earlier, self-regulate, because a child could be going through something and we are not able to deal with it because we're going through our own issues. So we have to be able to gauge where we are throughout the day so that we can pay attention to what's going on with the students and be able to pay attention in the difference in those behaviors and not automatically jump on them for something that's going on. We have to understand that the youth that we work with, the brain is not fully developed until age 25. So we cannot expect them to handle situations the way we would as adults. So it's going to take them more time. It's going to take different strategies. We have to be creative in how we connect with the youth and to try to make sure that we are understanding where they're coming from so we can best assist them when they're going through crisis.
Great. And I think it all comes back to that, having that rapport with that child and with the child's parents to be able to have these frank discussions and kind of get to the bottom of it.
Yeah. And I would even say, you know, everything Janielle said was so important, especially with, I'm a big trauma-informed care person. But even mental health education could even look like social emotional wellness. I mean, some of you may be out there thinking, well, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a social worker, I don't know how to incorporate mental health education. But we all have the ability to incorporate some form of social emotional wellness. You know, allowing kids an opportunity to identify their feelings. What are you feeling right now? Do an emotional check-in. Allow them an opportunity to learn empathy and regard, as Janielle talked about earlier, to where, how would you feel if somebody did that to you? You know, open that space of that dialogue. And even incorporating into your everyday teaching practices. You know, we don't just want to develop a generation of smart people. We want to develop a generation of emotionally intelligent people. And so that is so important for the well-being and the overall wellness of our children. And so try not to feel overwhelmed or feel like you have to have a degree or some type of certification in mental health to be able to tap into the mental, emotional wellness of the children that are sitting in your classroom. You all have some skill or life experience that could be imperative to teaching to that child.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to add something to that as well. Is just meet them where they are. You know, the level of their understanding and the level of, you know, what maybe they're going to be able to comprehend is different. And just by introducing the topic, you know, we're working to end the stigma. We're working to normalize mental health and what mental wellness is, you know. So I think that's really important, is to, when bringing up the conversation and when talking about it, do it in a way when they are, you know, when you deal with youth, you know, try to educate yourself in the trends and the lingo and the things and stuff like that. So it's easier for them to receive and to understand it.
Excellent. And I think providing that safe space for them to be able to talk to you. And we have such an amazing opportunity to bond with these kids. And sometimes you as caregivers and workers, you're the closest thing that they have, the person to talk to. So it's imperative to be able to open up those lines of communications and make sure that it's a safe thing so they don't feel embarrassed.
I agree with that. And I wanted to add something else too, that it's important that when we are interacting with the students, that we pay attention to how we are and how we conduct ourselves, even when we're not interacting with them, because they're always watching what we are doing. They're watching how we're treating other people, other students, other adults. And it's a lot easier to redirect behavior on what they should do when we're doing that ourselves. Because if we're telling them you should do it this way, but then they saw us conduct ourselves this way with someone else, it's going to be hard for them to want to listen to what we have to say. So it's another huge thing. Is just setting that example, listening to the students and listening to what is said as opposed to how it's said. Because a lot of times they may have that outburst, but that outburst could be a cry for help. And we have to be able to distinguish between the two.
Absolutely.
All right, that leads us to our question that we have with the children. What powers or skills do you think today's youth workers need in order to be successful? Let's start with Zaneta.
I say balance, being able to just balance and manage the classroom and things within yourself. Balance.
Excellent. How about Janielle?
One thing, I'm going to stick with patience. You have to have patience because dealing with a lot of students at one time, a lot of different personalities, it can be tough. So I agree with balance, but with that balance also have patience.
Yeah.
All right. And Alana?
So what I had in mind when we did this, mine was being a positive role model, but we kind of touched on and hit everything, you know, along that scope. But what I also thought would be a power skill is being knowledgeable of child development. Know where they are. When you get through that teenage puberty stage, for example, know what is going on, where children are, their development, where their emotional intelligence is at. Like you said, we're not fully developed until we're 25. So you have to know where the child is on a scientific biological level too. I feel like it's important.
Excellent. And I think my word would be grace. Having grace not only for the children, but also for yourself, and knowing that tomorrow's another day, and we'll get through it. So I think that that is a superpower in itself. All right, I think those are our questions that we have prepared. Is there any questions from the audience? Or Jamie, do you have some questions in the chat? We lost Jamie.
She put it on the bottom.
Hey, Sandy, look at the bottom since we can't see the chat in the background.
Oh, okay.
I've been adding the questions from the audience to our lower thirds, so they're going to pop up as you go along.
All right, excellent. All right. I think this is.
I'll go ahead and ask the first one.
All right, thank you. I can only see part of it.
Yeah. What is the best way to discuss child behavior issues with parents and caregivers?
I would say start with the strengths of the child, because we want to open up, we want to set the tone for the conversation to be positive and receptive. And normally when we come from a negative place or a deficit place, then it could cause that parent or caregiver to be more responsive versus being open to hear. And so start with that child's strengths, what they've been doing well. I don't care if it's the smallest thing. They put their pencil down quietly. I don't care. But start with the strength before you go into the needs. I wouldn't call it a problem. So be mindful of the language you use. Try not to use derogatory or bias. Sometimes we have implicit biases that show up that we don't necessarily recognize. So be mindful of your implicit biases, but just show and try and come from a genuine place. But starting with the strengths will allow the conversation to be set in a more receptive way, in my opinion, at least.
No, I agree 100% with you. And I was thinking along the same lines throughout my career. When we have children that act out all the time, we utilize what we call, some people call it the therapeutic sandwich, or we say 4 to 1s. For every one negative, we have to introduce 4 positives. So I agree with what Zaneta said. And I agree, if they put their pencil down quietly, thank you for that. You came in, your shoes are tied, your pants pulled up, I'm happy, thank you. But also it's important to have that rapport with that family. And to be able to have those tough conversations, because when you have that rapport with the family and you let the family know how well he's doing or she's doing, however, this is something that we can work on, that parent is going to immediately turn to that child and like, okay, why are we not working on this? So having that rapport with them and letting the parents know that the reason why you are here to help them, that will help that conversation as well.
Yeah, I think something important too is to expect resistance and know how to recover. You know, in these situations, I think we talked about this in our dry run in the panel. A lot of the times you're going to have parents who are not going to be open to what you're going to say at first. They're going to be like, you know, it's different. You know, when I was younger, it was the teacher's right. What are you doing? But now it's my child is right. You know, I don't know what you're talking about. And that's not always the case, but to expect the resistance and know how to recover, to keep the emotional regulation, bring it back to a subliminal level. Don't match sometimes if a parent or a caregiver might, you know, be loud or their emotions might get the best of them, is to just bring it back to a calmer level, listen to them, know that they're going to voice their concerns. Like we said, the body movements, letting them finish when they're talking, don't fidget, give them the full attention, make them feel heard too, because it's in their nature to protect their child. So just know how to recover from it and expect, you know, some of those issues may arise.
Yeah, I like that, allowing them to feel heard too. I think that is important, Alana, because sometimes I've heard, you know, when working with families, that the teachers, we show up as the experts in their child's life. And a lot of times we aren't, you know, we may be with them throughout majority of the day, but that parent or that caregiver sees the whole version of them 24 hours a day. And so allowing them to come and explain, like, yeah, I know he showed up this way, but he had a rough night. You never know what could be going on in the lives of that child. And so giving that family space to also feel heard, like Alana said, I think is very important.
And I agree with that. Sometimes we can just, if it's before school care, just simply asking that parent, how was their night last night? Because again, they could have had a bad night, or they could have woke up on the wrong side of the bed and not having a good morning. So that when the child comes in, if we know they're not in a good mood, we can know how to address it accordingly. And one thing that I keep in mind, we have to understand as adults, sometimes when we go to work, sometimes when we wake up in the morning, we are not in the best of mood. Children go through the same thing. So we have to keep that in mind, that they're humans as well, and we have to give them that same grace.
Excellent. And I think that having your first interaction with a parent be a positive one instead of a negative one is also keep developing those relationships with those parents. It is going to be half the battle.
Yes.
All right, David, do you have another question? Okay, how can you build good rapport with parents, caregivers right from the beginning? Oh, we just talked about that. What are some good openings, good statements, or good things to touch on?
Something I just think off the hand is to be initiative. You know, you make the effort to make that first initial contact. So you are immediately showing you have the interest and you have the best care at mind. Maybe I don't have anything specific that you can say on mine, but open-ended questions. You know, you're allowing the space to the parent or the caregiver to, you know, share as much information as they want, or maybe bring something to your attention that you would have never thought to bring up before. So having those open-ended questions and being initiative to show that you care and you want to understand their child.
Yeah. I noticed I have a middle schooler, and the first week of school, he sent with a packet of forms, and one of those forms asked, what are some things I should know about your child? What are some things I should know about your family? I like those questions. I like those forms because it tells me that you are interested in getting to know more about my child and their unique personality or their unique needs and our family unique needs, in hopes that you'll be sensitive to it. And so, you know, doing little things like that, inviting the families to provide information or feedback about that child, I think is a good rapport building strategy.
You all hit the nail on the head. I have nothing else to add.
Yes, and I know for caregivers, getting along with kids is easy. The parents are sometimes scary, but I think the more that you make that effort to get to know the parents, get to know what the parents feel about their kids, what do they like? What, you know, I love that idea about having a worksheet that you send home, and to get to know the kids. All right. Next question. What is an effective way to communicate a child's struggles to a parent that is in denial of their child's behavior? Oh boy. Great question. Anyone want to tackle that one?
I think this is something, again, we have to be sensitive to when communicating it with the parents. And throughout my trainings, we all just got out of a pandemic. And I do understand that there were some teachers that tried to inform the parents of some of the things their child may have been going through. However, they were in denial. However, the country was shut down for 4 months, and that child ended up having to be homeschooled. So in turn, what happened, the parent began to see what the child was doing that the teacher were trying to communicate with. So I do believe that did bring some understanding to some parents, but just doing their due diligence and trying to have that conversation and that dialogue with the parents to let them know what they're doing. I believe in having parent-teacher conferences, just so that everybody can be on the same page.
Yeah. I would like to say facts over feelings. Stick to the facts. You know, that parent may come from an emotional place, and it may be it may be triggering for you to match that emotionality. But I say keep it with the facts. Just stick to the facts. And if you have facts to prove your point, it is what it is. But try to just stay with facts over feelings.
I just wanted to add something really quick. A lot of the things that I feel like I'm an understanding of and I'm a professional of is a lot of human behavior. So a lot of the way that I answer things and things I feel like resolution has a lot to do with human behavior. So I feel like getting to know the parent, even if it's a sit down, and how they are. How are they dressed? Are they fidgeting? How are they sitting? Ask them how their day was. How are they doing? Maybe things that aren't completely related to the child. You get an understanding of who the person is. And when you understand the parent, how they are, the person, how they handle things, you'll be able to talk to them, know your audience, and talk to them differently. So you may know more how to effectively communicate with them and introduce the topic to them versus somebody else.
Yeah. And, I would even add to that, don't just show up with the problem, but be solution focused as well. And ask for permission if this is a good idea or if they agree with the intervention. Like, I noticed that they have trouble with staying on task. How do you feel if I move them closer to me, closer to the front? Because, and so come with the intervention or strategy and almost get their permission or their buy-in if they feel that's a good idea. So don't just be problem-centered, but also be solution-focused.
I like that a lot. Getting them so you're on the same team instead of
absolutely.
Yes. Child. Yeah. All right, next question. If you're worried that a child is considering self-harm or suicide, what should you do? Wow. Who wants to tackle that one?
Janielle, this is in your wheel. It's in mine too, but it's in your wheelhouse.
If we are worried, if a child is considering self-harm, what should we do? First and foremost, we need to pull that child aside and have a conversation with them. And I would definitely include the licensed mental health clinician, because I understand, although I'm there for support, I am not that clinician, and I do offer that support. One thing that I did do to ensure that I was providing active supervision in the classroom is that I was constantly moving, because a child could be self-harming themselves and we not know it if we're just sitting behind a desk and not up and moving around. So it's important to constantly be moving, looking around, and ensuring that we have to also listen to what they're saying. I also looked at what they're writing sometimes, because if they're writing, I want to hurt myself, or I don't want to be here anymore. They didn't tell us that, but we see it. So then we have to get the appropriate parties in place to intervene.
I agree. That could be such a tough, situation for licensed and unlicensed professionals. Even as a licensed therapist, Baker acting is difficult for me sometimes for a few reasons. But, you find yourself not wanting to be overzealous and, and be exaggerated with the child situation, but also the fear of, well, what if I don't respond appropriately and they do something to harm themselves or take their lives? And so, I tell a lot of my therapists who work with me, or even the people who work with children, ask direct questions. Are you having thoughts of, we could say harming yourself, but I say specifically of taking your own life? Because sometimes they may have thoughts of not wanting to be here, but that does not mean that they have a plan to take their own life. And so to not put you as teachers or support staff in the position to be a therapist to try and figure that out, tap into your resources that are there who are trained to figure it out. If that looks like, hey, you know what, I think it's a good idea for you to go visit the guidance counselor or whatever clinical professional you have there. There are crisis units in the community that are assigned to respond to possible self-harm situations. Like PIMS has a mobile crisis unit. But simply ask that child, are you having these thoughts? If you notice, like Janielle was saying, cuts or marks or burns, on their arm, or it's hot, it's 106 degrees, and they're wearing long sleeves, and they're constantly covered up, then those are some telltale signs. But we don't want you to feel like you have to jump into the role of the clinician. So ask questions, connect with the professionals who are licensed or who have the ability or trained to detect these sort of things if you're unsure. That's what I always go to when I'm helping non-licensed clinicians or non-clinicians to kind of sort through that.
Absolutely. I think it's important to ask directive yet not baiting questions. I think that's really big too. There's a difference between being directive and sort of putting the words into their own mouth when you are, however way you say it. And if you're already jumping to the assumption and the conclusion, can really cause, if it is a situation where something seriously might be happening, you might have that child close down. And that's the last thing you want to do. You want to make them feel safe, directive, but not baiting, and I think that's very important. And another thing that you said as well is we all have feelings, individuals with suicidal ideation sometimes, or just those who may be going sometimes, and I don't feel like I want to be here sometime. Me being comfortable speaking of my own lived experience. I had a situation where I shared with a professional one time, I miss my grandma and I think my grandma's here, and sometimes I'd just rather be there with her because I'm sure she's in a better place than I am right now. And sometimes, that if you're unsure of what they may mean by that, be more directive and ask more questions, or consult with someone who may be able to distinguish that as well. Don't jump to the conclusions of that, and my comfortable, I've had that experience happen to me where I was placed under the Baker Act by saying that. And I was like, whoa, I was just trying to explain, like, I miss my grandma. And you can really close off. And for me, I had the longest time feeling comfortable to disclose again because I felt like I was going to be penalized.
Well, thanks for sharing. And I think it's really important to have a knowledge of what resources we have to connect out to, because we're not all mental health professionals. But if you have a list of places to go to send people or parents, and that you have that in advance, you're not struggling to find it at the last minute. And even having conversations with these professionals in the community to say, if this does happen, how do I handle it? I think that's an important part as well. Mm-hmm. Thank you. All right, Jamie, next question. How do we support a child who is being isolated or excluded from their peers? There's always that one.
This is something that is huge, because one thing we know that goes on in schools is bullying, and it's so many different forms now. I just encourage to, one, build a rapport with that child and utilize the other positive influences in the classroom, other students that will be able to reach that student, that will be able to speak with that student to help them feel included. So that's what I would recommend.
Yeah. And I think if this is a situation to where the students are excluding or isolating one child, I would again allow that. If I notice it, I would allow it to be we would discuss it as a whole, a group discussion without calling anybody out. I notice you all are leaving John out. We won't do that. Mm-hmm. But we will have a teachable moment about empathy and regard and, and cohesiveness and how important it is for us to support each other. So I will allow it to be a teachable moment. I would stop the classroom or just include it in an activity, because we don't want to be fostering that type of behavior, by being passive or failing to address it is almost condoning it, like bullying. And so I think we have a responsibility to, when we see things like that, to step in and allow it to be a social, emotional, teachable moment to where the students can kind of realize what they're doing, indirectly and stop that type of behavior and help that child that's being excluded or isolated to feel more welcome. Again, it may be a part of their unique interpersonal personality or their nuances, especially, you know, if they are on the spectrum, have spectrum disorders, things like that, to where they may not even desire to be included. Mm-hmm. But we don't want to foster isolation or exclusion in our classrooms.
You know, I almost offer something, and I believe a lot of these situations are very much circumstantial. That's why it is always important to build a rapport and know your children in your classroom. But maybe something differing a little bit in a different avenue from what Zaneta said, again, very circumstantial, is if there is a moment of opportunity or something presents itself in a way that isn't vindictive and, you know, demeaning to the peer who is excluding. But maybe if you could, having that conversation, hey, why don't you hang out with Johnny so much? And you may be open to something where the peer may say, well, Johnny's always mean on me in the playground, or Johnny always says this, or Johnny always turns the other way when I try to talk to him. And you may uncover something that may be going on in that child's life, that they're being angry and they're being dismissive, and they're may not intentionally isolating themselves, but being isolated because of their behaviors. And you may be able to discover a root of something they may be going through, you know, exposing if they're feeling these feelings of anger. Why are you feeling angry, Johnny? What are these things? And you may be able to resolve it by understanding where those students who are excluding them, because maybe there's situations going on and things that you don't always see, like what goes on in the playroom or the playground or the lunchroom and stuff like that.
No, I think that's great. And coming out of the pandemic, I don't think kids know how to make friends. You know, those skills are not innate in kids. So helping them to learn how to make friends and what a friend is, I think is important. And when you're having games or activities, kind of making them so that they are in special groups, that they work together as teamwork and things like that, that you can organically kind of bring this child that's on the outside in, and even finding a peer that you know your kids, you know the ones that will go out and help another child, kind of maybe pulling them aside and saying, hey, Johnny's not having a great day. Would you mind being his buddy today, or something like that? So great question. Jamie, you have another one? Okay, how do you regulate your emotions if you're feeling negative at work or around kids? That never happens.
I think it's important to be firm, fair, and consistent. And I say that because there can be times when we're not having a good day. And when you are consistent with youth, if you're, say, for instance, you have a youth that always use profanity. And for example, so when I was working with the department, I used to tell the students, please don't curse because it makes my ears bleed. And every time they use poor language, I'm saying, you're making my ears bleed. I always point it to my ear. So on a day when I wasn't feeling well and I would hear them cursing, I would just point to my ear. And they'll say, my bad, Miss Janielle, I didn't mean to cuss. I didn't say a word. All I did was point to my ear. So when we are able to be consistent in our daily interactions with the students, I believe it can help us when we're really not in the mood. And we have to also, as professionals, understand, even when we're not having a bad day, we cannot take it out on the students, because they're going to respond based off of how we respond to them, interact with them. So we have to keep that in mind when interacting with the students. That's a great question.
Yeah, I think a big thing, again, like I like to preach, is, you know, getting ahead of it and being a prevention thing. Something that in my last internship, I was with NAMI Pinellas, and they have a program, and it's called WRAP, Wellness Recovery Action Planning. So part of having a WRAP plan is, one, knowing what your stressors are. So it's really important to identify your stressors. And when you do identify those stressors, if they do happen and you aren't experiencing, you know, maybe it is related to the classroom, outside the classroom, you're just having a bad day, having a toolbox of things that you can maybe literally go into that give you self-care and make you feel better, or maybe it's an emotional thing or something that you can respond to bring yourself to a level place. And then understanding if those things in your toolbox aren't working, who can I turn to? Who can I support? Who can I lean on? Who can help me assist in this situation if there's a point where I have to remove myself and I'm comfortable with this person to explain my situation or to step into my place. So having a plan of events, if A happens, that B will happen. And if B doesn't work, this is what C is.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think making sure that you have a coworker or somebody that you can say, hey, listen, I need a timeout, remove yourself from the situation, gather back your emotions back in check, and remember what you need to do. It's okay. I know that we're talking about superheroes, but all superheroes need a break every once in a while. So giving yourself that opportunity to step back, step out, and collect yourself. And I also don't think it's a bad thing to share with the kids. Hey, listen, I'm having a bad day, and I need you guys to help me. We're going to try to do, some fun things today, but showing them that you're human, you have these emotions, and how you deal with them can also help them to know when they're having a bad day, appropriate behaviors to do as well. All right, Jamie, how do you help calm a child if they're having an outburst?
Okay, so I like to use the acronym ADAPT. The first thing we want to do is we want to pull the child aside. Now, first and foremost, safety and security is number one. We have to make sure that child is not a threat to themselves or others. We might not be able to pull the child aside. Sometimes we have to remove the audience. So we want to pull that child aside, which is the A. The D is to discuss the feelings that aroused. Ask them what happened. Ask them what's going on. We want to pay attention to our demeanor, because depending on the age of the student, we might be much bigger than them, and they can take it as being intimidated. The other A is we could discuss the alternatives that they could have utilized with that outburst. This is, of course, when they're calm. The P is let's plan how we're going to get through this situation if it does happen again with the student. Mm-hmm. And lastly, the T is then going to transition a student back with the rest of the group. But when engaging with that student that's having an outburst, I do believe in I go back to rapport, because paying attention to the warning signs. Before the warning, before crisis, we also always have the warnings. We have escalation, then they go into crisis. So if we're interacting and we're engaged with our students, when we see that child huffing and puffing or sitting there mad with their arms folded, that is when we need to intervene so they don't have that time to escalate or get into that crisis.
Yeah, I agree with Janielle. I like to say, find ways to calmly redirect the student's behavior, offering support and choice, avoiding escalation responses, again, like raising your voice, getting physically close to that child, teach strategies of conflict resolution. How do you think you should address this situation? Or what do you think would be the best decision to make now? Give supportive feedback to reduce negative thinking. You want to stop and replace that child's negative thinking. I'm so stupid. Everybody hates me. Who knows what they're feeling in that moment. I like to say use language like, okay, let's pause and take a deep breath. We want to stop and have them pause. Asking them, are you okay? What are you feeling right now? Do an emotional check-in with that child. Ask them, can you use your words to tell me what's going on? A lot of times they may be using their behaviors or their bodies, but can you use your words? We want them to tap into the language of what they're feeling. And then sometimes for some kids, especially those who have a trauma background, a recent one, reassure them that they're safe and okay. Like you're okay, right? Reassure them that they're okay in that moment, because they may have a heightened emotional response to the smallest thing if they have recently experienced a trauma, and that might be what you're seeing happening right now. And so just reassure them that they're safe and they're okay, and let's figure this out.
You know, something that stuck out to me that Janielle said that kind of made like my brain, you know, sort of turn its wheels is the P in the plan part. You know, I know sometimes, you know, if it's the first time a student or a child has an outburst, there's really nothing you can do to plan. But if it's someone who's had an outburst before, or if it's something in some way you can get ahead, talk to the child. Hey, if this happens and you're feeling this way, what do you want me to do? What is going to help you? Let me be of assistance to you. So when an outburst or something does arise, you have the tools that you need to help this child as well.
Great.
Yeah.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. Specifically, how can we work with a child who has autism that is having an outburst?
Go ahead, Zaneta. No, go ahead.
I would say not all children with autism present the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there are commonalities with children with autism that they present with, but not all of them have the same triggers, the same nuances, or show up the same way in the classroom. And so it, like Alana's big on relationship and getting to know that child. So have in mind that child in particular, who and how they are, and find the most appropriate ways to that they respond to. By now, unless it's first day of school, you should have an idea of how that child shows up and how they respond in certain ways or to certain interventions. And so use interventions that are appropriate to that child, and try to avoid things that could be more triggering for that particular child. And so I think it's very individualized. The approach should be tailored to the child. Of course, go back to, you might be tired of hearing me say it, but maybe if I can drive it home again, that trauma-informed care is, I think that goes with any child, whether even if they don't have a trauma or not. I think it's important that we still practice, you know, those trauma-informed responses. And yeah, that's my take on it.
You summed it all up.
Well said.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think knowing the child's triggers, I think that's so important before they get to that point where they're out of control. And usually, you know, and the parents know, and they have strategies so that communication with the parents, I think, is so important.
Yes.
Well, okay, one more. How do you use your superpower to break cultural and language barriers?
Well, I mean, I get, so all of you may have your own little superpowers, right? Your own big superpowers that you have noticed work for you, or what make you unique, or you, right? You awesome in your field or just as a person in general. And so I think for us to have cultural awareness, right, is important. So in my superpower as an influencer, I still have to have cultural awareness of how I influence. The way that I may be able to influence or impact someone of one culture may not show up in a different, or someone with a language barrier or a language difference may not be the same. And so being mindful that my superpower is still great and still impactful. However, it's important that I am mindful of, I'm culturally aware, culturally affirmed, and I don't do one size fits all for how I show up.
I agree with you 100%. With breaking cultural and language barriers, you have to be culturally competent, and you have to be patient and understanding when dealing with other cultures and with language barriers. So I agree with you 100% with being culturally competent.
Yeah.
You know, same thing like both you guys are saying, like being consistent with it. And then my superpower being resilience. Try again. If there was one way or one approach that you had that didn't work because of, you know, your lack of cultural understanding. Make the effort to have the cultural understanding, be culturally competent. And if the second time it doesn't work, try again the third way, try again the fourth way, until eventually you can come to a cohesive place, or maybe the people who are your directed at it will take a step towards you and try to meet you in the middle too. So just being consistent, because when you be consistent, it will show across the board. You know, if there's language barrier, cultural competence, or whatever it is, it'll show you being genuine, and it'll show care, and you'll be surprised about how much more people will react to that.
Yes.
I love
That's
that.
a good question. Yeah.
That is.
It is. All right, Jamie, we have any more, or should we wrap it up?
No more questions.
All right. Well, it's been a really informative discussion. Thank you to our superhero presenters, Janielle, Alana, and Zaneta, for sharing your time and your talents. And thanks to our audience for your great questions. Keep being superheroes to your kids and use your superpowers to promote positive change for youth. With that, it's over to you, Jamie.
Thank you, Sandy, Zaneta, Alana, and Janielle, for taking for sharing such great insight. The chat was buzzing the whole time, and we really had some awesome questions. I think the tips that we shared were very practical, and people can start using them today.
Absolutely.
So as a way of saying a special thank you to Sandy, we have a gift set up for her. She doesn't know this yet. Sandy, Liz Wooten-Reschke has graciously offered to donate a 1 hour of one-on-one virtual management coaching session, which is valued at $500, and we want to give it to you.
Wow.
So you'll be able to ask her anything.
Wow.
And yeah, I'll make sure that I get you connected with her on that coaching session.
Well,
thank you, Sandy, for all you do.
Thank you. And thank you, Liz. That's going to be awesome.
All right, everyone. How are we doing? Are we feeling empowered? Are we really like honing in our superpowers and wondering how we're going to use it for the day? I want to do a temperature check on the social wall. So let's go over to the social wall and let's post one thing that you've learned so far that you are taking with you after today. I'm going to open up my phone and see what you post. So what is one thing that you've learned so far that you plan to take with you today? Other than all of the challenge words you're trying to get. All right. Maybe it's in the chat. I'll check the chat too. Thank you all. Empathy. Empathy is a good one. I'm loving all of the photos on the social wall. I'm liking them. All right. Okay, next on the agenda, we have a short video from Brene Brown. Brene is an American professor, author, and podcast host. Her TEDx on the power of vulnerability went viral in 2010, and she has since written 6 #1 New York Times best-selling books. Let's take a look at her thoughts on empathy.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Wasn't that a powerful short video? It's all about connection, isn't it? So what better word for our next challenge, passcode, challenge word? It is connection. So let's go ahead and add that to our challenge words and see where we're at on the leader scoreboard. So I'm going to check in on the leader scoreboard and see who is in first, second, and third place. There's still room for more challenge words to be added. Brittany, wow. Annalise and Ashley Collins. Cool. Okay, you guys are up there. All right, I love it. So I know you will love our last speaker, Herbie Mack. Herbie is a safe talk training and suicide interventionalist. He has a powerful message to share on the power of you. So let's all lean in as I welcome to the virtual stage, Herbie Mack.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So with that being said, I'm going to put out a trigger warning because I do mention suicide for those. Here I am at work. I'm in the break room and I get approached by an older coworker. Let's call her Miss Jackson. She said, I noticed in the last month or so, your behavior have changed. What's going on? I know we're not friends, but I just noticed something's going on with you. I work with you all the time and I enjoy working with you. You're one of the reasons I love coming to work. Even though we work a 9-hour shift, the way your energy, you bring laughter, joy, and all of this. But something's going on. Miss Jackson gave a vibe of a mom, and her presence was so warming. So I decided to tell her the truth, that I was just overwhelmed. I've been working a lot in life. I have no idea what I'm doing. And she said, I noticed you've been working a lot, and that's fine. Why don't you take some time off to reflect? So I took her advice. I took 4 days off to think about where I'm going with my life, what I'm doing. And those 4 days off, since it was near the holidays, it was very important for me to recharge. I discovered that it's December, and I discovered I only took 15 days off throughout the whole year because I've been working so much. I kept realizing that my job depended on me all the time. I was being a yes person, and I had to learn to take care of myself. I don't know if you ever heard of the saying, put your own oxygen mask on first before assisting others. So in that time, I realized I had a month worth of PTO. So I went to my boss and I said, hey, I have a month worth of PTO. Do you mind if I take some time off to recharge and reflect? Boss was kind of mad. He's like, yeah, you have a lot of PTO. And I told him, I don't know if you understand what PTO means. And he looks at me and says, yeah, paid time off. And I looked at him and I replied, no, prepare the others. He was kind of mad, but I had to tell him, hey, wait, before you get upset. I mean, prepare the others because you lean on me so much. You know, I'm reliable. You know, I come in anytime you need me. I stay after my shift to help others. But I work with my coworkers and some of them are amazing. They're superstars, but you're not giving them that opportunity to grow. So I want to take some time off to do things that I enjoy. He was cool with it. So I was journaling and I realized I enjoy helping out others. But how can I help out others? I was like, I don't know. You know, I'm a helper. And I started volunteering. And I started volunteering, realizing that I was doing work as far as painting houses for low-income families, donating, giving away turkeys, chickens, all of that, gifts. And it made me feel good. I went back to Miss Jackson. I told her, thank you. I started discovering, one, the power of no, and telling people no, and it's okay because you have to take care of yourself. And then also telling her thank you because I was discovering my superpowers of being able to connect with others, being able to embrace the things that I'm great at. Around this time, one of my customers been coming to my job for years, mom, single mom. And she came up to me. She said, hey, I don't know if you know about my son. My son looks up to you, which I had no idea. She said, my son looks up to you, but in the last few months, he's been acting up. Her son is about 13 years old. Do you mind talking to him? I said, sure, no problem. Let me talk to him. As I'm talking to him, he's just like, man, my mom don't get it. I'm in middle school. I'm trying to find my group. I'm trying to find everything, but I'm isolating myself. Nobody wants to be my friend. My mom's telling me I have to be a teacher or I have to be a doctor, and I don't want to do that. She's not even listening to me. So I told the mom what was going on, and she said, Herbie, I would pay for you to be his mentor. I said, nah, it's okay. I knew this situation wasn't the best, and I didn't want to take advantage. And I've been knowing her for years. So it's like, fine, no worries. I'll do this for free. Only if you allow me to coach him and you don't interfere. She said, it's perfectly fine. As I'm sitting there and I'm talking to him and he's like, hey, you know, he's so excited. He's like, hey, we're going to go play some sports or we're going to go play video games. I said, no, I'm not here for that. I'm actually here to understand why your behavior have changed. So do me a favor. I'm going to give you an assignment. Unfiltered. I want you to write how you feel. And he thought it was silly. He thought it was stupid. And he's like, I don't want to do that. And I decided to be vulnerable with him. Told him when I was his age, unfortunately, I attempted suicide because I was isolated. No one gave me a safe space. No one wanted to hear me, let alone acknowledge me. That young man looked me in the eyes and said, so you do get it. And he accepted the assignment. I only told him to write about 3, maybe 4 paragraphs. Did you know this kid wrote me like 5 pages of work, which I was very impressed. But I read it. And as I read it, I realized the things that was going on. He thought no one got him. He didn't have any male figures. Unfortunately, his father had died at an early age. His brother, 20 years older than him, married, doing his own thing. And he just wanted somebody to just hear him, but not only hear him, see him. So I met him where he was at. As I met him where he was at, and it's something that I do want to point out, being a coach or being a teacher, being someone who works with kids, meeting them where they are and not what you expect them to be makes life so much easier. So I met him where he was at. I gave him that safe space to express himself and came up with a game plan with him. But first we had to have a discussion with his mom. His mom was like, no. This is what he needs to do. And I had to tell the mom, look, you're not listening to understand, you're listening to reply. It's important for us to come on common grounds and meet your son where he's at. After about 5-6 months of working with him, kid did a 180. Instead of his behavior changing and him even thinking about self-harm went out the window, his grades went from C to A+. Actually made the honor roll. I discovered that was like my superpower, being able to create safe spaces for those who wasn't heard nor seen. So after that, I decided to leave my job and actually get into working with kids, working with adults as well. Then I'm in this recovery place, right? I finally get a job. I'm working in a recovery place with youth. And I had this young man come up to me, and he had a real substance issue. One of the counselors there was like, I don't know if he's going to make it. We tried everything. And I said, yeah, that's fine. Have you tried listening to him and asking him, what does he want? They looked at me like I was weird. It's like, no, let's meet him where he's at, not where we want to take him. That's always my philosophy. And in that probably 4 months, he changed from really being addicted to doing things that I couldn't even imagine. He was sitting here being able to help others, teach others the techniques that I was teaching him, talking to his family, being able to stand up for himself. And I'm in this place and I'm thriving. I'm helping other youth members as far as with substance issues, letting them know that I see you, I hear you. You can change. You are not your addiction. Along those lines of that, the same kid comes up to me and said, hey, Herbie, you changed my life. You're my role model. I look up to you. But right now, my living situation is terrible. I don't really have a place to really eat. I can't find work. My mom's, we're struggling. Is there anything that we can do? In my mind, I'm like, oh, yeah, I got you. Let's go look into some resources for food, probably food pantry and all that. And we Google a couple of places and I called. On there, I'm getting terrible service. The person, I'm like, hey, I know you guys are closed. Is there a certain time that you guys open? Can y'all open up early? I have one of my clients that's struggling, doesn't have enough food to make it throughout tonight. Lady was so rude to me, it wasn't even funny. She transferred me to a boss, and the boss just started really yelling at me. In my mind, I'm like, man, do you not know this work that I'm doing? Like, man, I'm helping saving lives. Like, what's going on here? That's when I had to take a step back and check my ego. I'm thinking about what I did and all the hard work that I'm doing, not realizing that I'm here to help others as well. So after I get off the phone, I called one of my friends who luckily had a food pantry, had access to a food pantry place. So we get him some food and we make it. And the whole time I was just really upset. I said, I have to do more. How can I help others? How can I give back if people are not knowing who I am and all of that? So I decided to start going to conferences, networking events, just to make a connection. Just to make a connection so people can realize who I am. Not just the fact, because I know being a superhero, sometimes we have to take on things that's bigger than us and we need assistance. Very similar to the Avengers. If you guys watch Marvel, you guys get it. Everyone has their own superpowers, and sometimes you have to team up with others to take on something bigger than you. Little did I know, the kid comes back to me, the youth that I was working with, the substance issue. He comes back to me and he said, hey, Herbie, look, I know I graduated from this place. I'm doing well, but hey, in my community, they give me a reward for, my accomplishment. They see me change. I said, sure, I'll be there, buddy. I got you. that same lady that gave me attitude, the same boss that gave me attitude, didn't really know who I was. This kid introduced them to me. He's like, hey, remember the guy that I told you that helped save my life when I was like struggling with my substance abuse problems, and even when I was thinking about self-harm? This guy saved my life. This is Herbie. This is Herbie. Those two people looked at me and was like, wow, hey, sorry for our conversation last time. Being able to realize that I had a chance to help them. I also had a chance to have access. Like, we built a connection. We're pretty good friends now from being jerks to one another. Once you learn to remove your ego and your pride, you realize you can get more things done when you work together as a team. And that of me working with the youth and realizing that, yes, I have superpowers and all of that. I always think of Miss Jackson, that conversation that she had with me to build the connection of, hey, take a moment to take some time off to recharge. Take a moment to discover your superpowers because you're special. You may not know it, but you are. I was always like, man, how can one, like, what does it look like to find superpowers and how to do that? So with that being said, I'm going to get into a quick presentation. So I know the theme is the power of you. And with that, everyone here on this call, in my eyes, you guys are superheroes. You guys are taking on a task like no other. But as I said, it always takes a team to make that happen. So there may be someone that was in the same situation as myself that was struggling, that didn't know how to discover their superpowers. So I just did a quick bulletin points just for you guys to understand. These are some of the tools that I've used. Actually, all of them are all I use as far as self-reflection and also journaling. And then discovering my passion and realizing that I was able to help others and being helpful. And then I think in the panel, they was talking about a support system as well. Having people that you can rely on as far as input. Hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? And then one of the biggest things that I did to discover my superpower, I took some assignments. One of them was the DISC program, learning how to not only communicate with others, but learning how to communicate with myself. And that was something I was like, oh, okay, cool. This is what it says I am, which is pretty much accurate. But then also thinking about the past achievements that I've achieved, right? I was able to help others, help this kid get his life together, but not only help him, but help myself, because I did struggle with suicidal ideation and attempts, and learn from that, right? Learn how to be better. And realizing that it's okay to ask for help. And I don't like to necessarily say ask for help. I like to say use your resources, because they are valuable and you are valuable. So we all have assets that we can use, and it's just like, oh, hey, I may need help in this, or I may need guidance in this. Now, when it comes to using your superpowers to empower the youth, these are certain things and skill sets that some of you guys may have, right? Very similar to Miss Jackson. Her superpower to me was having empathy, or being empathetic. She knew something was wrong with me. She gave me a safe space to just vent and tell her what I was going through. And she didn't give me any answers of like, oh, hey, you should do this, you should do that. She just listened. And then she recommended, hey, so am I hearing you clearly? It sounds like you burned out. Take some time off and reflect. Do something to make you happy, which I thank her every day for that. And also, when it comes to communicating, realizing like being clear and honestly being direct. When you're working with youth, I worked with youth, being clear on, hey, this is what I'm hearing. Is that correct? Helped out. And also patience, right? Meeting them where they are, not where you want them to be. having compassion as far as kindness. And something that one of the biggest things that I've used on this list is creativity. As we get older, we don't play as much, or we don't have that creative mindset to just create. Me being not only working with youth, but being a dad as well, I've learned the importance of doing something that can inspire their creativity. Another superpower is being able to adapt. Sometimes we have this plan in life and it doesn't go accordingly. So you have to learn how to be flexible, not only with you, but with them as well. Some things happen and you just have to learn to adjust with them. As far as being positive, man, positivity is something that I've realized that's important when you're working with youth. Like, hey, you did this achievement, give them their flowers and let them know. And then being resilient, teaching them coping strategies and helping them bounce back. And I know some of you are probably like, hey, I'm not a mental health professionals. When I think of coping strategies, very similar to what the young lady said about rap, like just teaching them basic things as far as writing, coloring. That's something that I do now, even as an adult. And then also creating that safe space with them, like letting them know, like, hey, what's going on? Okay, this is what I'm hearing. This is how we can attack this, right? I don't even want to say attack, but this is how we can work on this. And then also organization. When you think of organization, you probably think of time management, but I think of setting goals and also realizing that small goals are still goals, and not just, oh man, hey, you put your pencil down quietly. Like that's a goal that you wanted them to do, whether they was loud in class or if you notice that they have certain needs and issues and they just did something, just, hey, give them their flowers. And then I think about leadership in a positive way, as far as setting a positive example, right? Hey, this is how we act. This is how I act. This is how that, just really being a positive role model to them. These are ways that I've used and I still use to this day to empower youth. And I also use this to empower my own kids. And I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. And sometimes it's not easy, but I know the philosophy of this helps. It's prove evidence. In my story, I hope that you guys realize the importance of teamwork. Yeah, it's good to be your own superhero. And it's also great to have the self-awareness to understand that I may not be that person for this child. And that's okay. They was talking about language in the panel. And I think about language as far as it doesn't necessarily have to be like, oh, they speak Spanish, they speak French or anything like that. It could be a language as far as, oh, hey, I know they like listening to Jay-Z, or they like listening to Drake or J. Cole or something like that. And you can speak that language and use that reference of it, Drake or Jay-Z or Cole verse to help them break that. Oh, hey, I get it. Like this person gets me. I'm speaking in this language and they get it. And if you don't get it and someone else that may be able to help them, it helps in so many ways. When I was working at this recovery center, I had a young lady. She was very rough around the edges, let's say that. And some people were scared to work with her because she was too direct. She required a lot of attention. She had a lot of needs, which is perfectly fine. And they gave her to me. And I was able to help her out, right? Was able to listen to what she needed and how she wanted to do things. They was able to pass her off to me, not because, oh, hey, they did, Herbie's the last option, but it was just like, hey, we think Herbie's the best fit for you. And she honestly just wanted to work with a woman, but she worked with me and we changed everything around. She is now thriving in a way that I'm not even gonna lie, like it almost brings tears to my eyes to see her. But they was able to really pass her off to me because they knew I could handle that. And sometimes even for myself, I may pass off someone to someone else that's like, hey, I don't think I'm meant for them. Do you mind taking this? And that's just part of the teamwork. Having that self-aware and having that ability to understand that you may not be that person for them is perfectly fine. And also, when I was working with the 13-year-old kid, they was talking about on the panel, and I really wanted to take time to reflect on this, was working with the mom. The mom and the son was, I don't want to say difficult, but it was challenging because the mom had these expectations that was so high that I was just like, man, I don't even know if I can reach them as a grown man. And we had to communicate and realize, hey, this is a team. This is bigger than, you and I. It's about him. And we came down as a team to come up with a plan, and that helped out. I love when they said doing a sandwich. I had to do the sandwich with the mom as far as putting positive things like, hey, he's doing all of this. This is the positive things that he's doing. But you only see the negative. Like, embrace the positive as well. And then the negative things we can work on as a collective. As far as that, I've realized when it comes to youth and it comes to, I don't even want to say youth, when it comes to you as a person, you can't get overwhelmed taking on other people's things. And I think all of us know we can't pour from an empty cup. Self-care is something that I like to stress about having those times to recharge, right? Whether you decide to use your PTO for telling your boss to prepare the others, or doing something that makes you happy as far as picking up an activity. For myself, y'all can judge me if you want. I'm not going to care. For myself, I try to do yoga with my wife, or I do family time with my wife and kids because I need to recharge. And I get it. Not everyone thinks like, oh, hey, self-care is going out and getting a massage and getting your nails done and all that. No, self-care is doing things that help you recharge. And I actively every week make sure that I do something to make me recharge because it can get overwhelming. I talk about suicide prevention and I do interventions a lot. And that does take on a lot. Whether you're working with kids, whether you have your own situation at home, always try to put on your oxygen mask on first before assisting others. So coming up with a plan that, a self-care plan, and understanding your triggers as well. For myself, I know my triggers. I have them written down in my journal here. And I do things to make sure that my triggers is always at bay and not all over the place. So with that being said, for those who want to know, this is me. These are, if you want to connect with me, if you want to follow me, if you want to sit there and just learn some stuff. And if you have any questions when it comes to not only mental health and suicide prevention, please feel free. With that being said, I wanted to get ready to open the floor because I know when it comes to this conversation, it can be overwhelming as being, teachers and being those who have worked with you. You may have some questions, and I want to make sure that I can answer anybody's question. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Herbie. You are wonderful. You truly are a beacon of hope. Go ahead and put your questions in the chat for Herbie. I'm going to kick it off with a question.
Sure.
All right. So, how does mentorship play a role in unlocking the potential of young people? And what are some best practices for effective mentoring?
For myself, I realize mentorship plays a major role. For the 13-year-old kid, I was able to connect with him because I've seen what he was at. And me identifying, okay, he's not in the safest place when it comes to the mindset, I gave him simple tasks, just write, unfiltered, just write however you feel. And that allowed us to build a bond. And from there, he's being vulnerable, I was being vulnerable. It led to him actually thriving in a way where the mom couldn't believe.
Sorry, I had to put myself on mute because my baby's crying in the background. All right, next question. What does the power of you mean when working with youth, and how can individuals tap into their unique strengths and abilities?
So when I think of the power of you, we all have we're all superheroes here, and we all have certain superpowers. So for myself, I think of the superpower that I can use to help those. Like, for example, if I know someone is in a certain living situation and they are overwhelmed and they're not being seen and not being heard, well, I use my superpower of not only connecting with them, but having that safe place for them where they can express themselves. And then that I use that to tap in on them, pour in on them, and help them out with their potential, and how I can see their abilities of them growing.
That's awesome. I know when I was in cheerleading, one of my coaches asked me, do you do better with encouragement? Like, would you perform better when you're being encouraged? And that just changed everything. And it allowed me to tell people, like, you know, I do so much better. I open up when I'm encouraged. Okay. Next question. How can adults and mentors harness their life experiences and expertise to inspire and guide young people's personal and professional development?
Having a conversation with some adults can be challenging because they're like, not my child, not this. But actually just being open and honest with them and communicating with them. Like, hey, look, I understand that you want this goal, you want that goal, but this is where your child is at. Right. And this is where we need to meet them at, not just where you need, but we as a team, as a unit, and being able to say, hey, this is what I'm hearing. This is what I'm seeing. And this is where you want them to be. But together, let's work on this so we'd be able to get the best out of them.
I really liked how you mentioned that all of the superpowers for the youth. And it's funny, like, being positive and adaptable and patient is great. Someone wrote, why does it seem easier to focus on the negative rather than the positive? Some people might focus on what they're not doing and less of what they could be doing.
Oh, that's a great question. I think when it comes to the negative, we see it like, oh man, here they go again. For myself, I've learned that I don't want to say negative because it's not. It's just, I've learned to honestly just sit down and say, okay, it's going to take me back to like my high school coach of basketball. I've learned to write down the positives. And I don't like to say negative, but areas to improve in. These are the areas that they can improve in. But this is all the positive stuff that they do. And when you start writing all the positive stuff, whether that the child does, and you see the negative is like, oh, okay, or the areas to improve in is not that high. And you just slowly tackle them one by one.
One thing that I like to say is, for every negative thought, try to end it on a positive thought. So you're just more conscious about controlling your thoughts. So if you find yourself thinking so negatively for 5 minutes, try and flip the switch and say, well, I hate to say at least, because we want to take some of that out, but for yourself, at least I still have food on the table. Like, there still is some kind of positive outcome to your negative thoughts. And if you can just switch that perspective following up, I think it could be life-changing.
Yeah, I wanted to add to that.
Yeah.
So like one of my phones I use for like voice note as voice journaling. And when it comes to those negative thoughts, I always make sure I have gratitude, give myself gratitude, space, because sometimes those negative thoughts occur not only when we least expect it, but when you realize like, hey, I have opportunity to change someone's life. I have an opportunity to wake up this morning, and really that helps keep those negative thoughts at bay. And then when you're working with kids, I always think about the positive things that they've done, right? Mm-hmm. They came in, they said hello, they greeted me, take that. Like, sometimes we take that for granted, but I take that as like, okay, cool. And these are the areas that we have to improve in, whether it's behavior or whether it's just whether it's like the language that they use. If you realize like they're speaking to themselves in a negative way, just like, no, you're not dumb. No, you are smart. Look, you got an A on this, or you did this today. Like, you know, that giving them that power, that encouragement helps as well.
It does help. And I like how you saved your voice journals. We did pass out journals to everyone today in a little superhero pen. So use those journals to write down positive thoughts. One thing I do is I use my phone. I put in notes. If I have a really profound thought or something positive, I write it in there. And I have positive thoughts up from like 2010 still in there. And it's a great reference. And you might even forget what you wrote down and read back, and you're just like, wow, that was a really profound positive thought. And I'm happy it came back to me today. Let me look in the chat. Okay. Jasmine O'Neill asked, how do we talk about our experiences with attempting suicide on a professional level without jeopardizing your job? I'm sorry, I'm not able to bring it up. We're switching interpreters.
Okay. So how can we talk about suicide in a professional setting?
Yes, without feeling, without jeopardizing your job.
To be honest, I find someone that you can connect with at work and just tell them like, hey, I'm not feeling like myself. For my situation, as someone who attempted suicide multiple times, I had some coworkers that I was able to tell them like, hey, I'm not feeling like myself. And having that support helped out in so many ways. And then also, you know, I had a conversation with HR and just say, hey, look, this is what I'm going through. Is it okay if I take some time off? And they did. And I guess you could say, fortunately, I was able to like Baker rack myself and be able to really get the help that I need. So yeah, just find someone at work that you can trust and say, hey, look, I'm not feeling like myself. And I'm glad that we do have numbers that's like 988, or even like if you live in Tampa, or you can call 211 and you can actually get the support and help that you need. So with that, you can, I call that number multiple times. So they provide resources, and sometimes they provide a listening ear. Just if you just need a place to vent and tell them what you're going through, they are trained professionals. They're crisis counselors.
Thank you, Herbie, for that plug. Actually, in our journals, the first page is a list of mental health resources that you can access if you're feeling like you need them. So please reference that. And we also have mental health resources in our resources to save on one of our features. And there is a video from Zero Suicide Partners of Pinellas, and they can help get you connected to the needs too. But I really liked how you brought up about connecting with someone at work and letting them know what's going on, or if I feel this way, it might look like this kind of statement. I personally have dealt with that at work. I have a wonderful supervisor who reminds me every day, don't forget to spark joy. Do something today that sparks joy. And she's asked me before, are you okay? Do you need some time off? And really has worked with me on that. And I'm very thankful for it. And I hope that all of us who are watching today have an understanding that some of our staff members might be going through something and that it's okay. But like you mentioned, you have to put the oxygen mask on yourself first before others. And if as a leader or staff member or coworker, you can remind someone who may be struggling, take care of yourself first. You matter. And then they can contribute to, as you say, the team of the Avengers and come together to make something really powerful happen. All right. I am getting a lot of wonderful feedback, Herbie. Thank you for the great presentation. Sometimes actions speak louder than words. So by listening and showing up means so much. There's so many wonderful things being added to the chat. People are saying you're inspirational. Helping others can make you feel better about your own situation, and speak to yourself the way you would speak to a good friend. Be kind to yourself.
Yeah, I wanted to add on to what you were saying as far as leadership. You know, my job where I used to work at, I was one of the leaders there. And, you know, as a leader, you always want to lead by example. You want to show that you're perfect, right? And that time when I was vulnerable and I was having those suicidal ideations, I was self-aware that I needed some assistance. And that peer-to-peer connection of someone who gets you, that sees you every day, is key. And I had to tell him, like, look, I'm not feeling okay. You know, I need some, look, I got a month of PTO that I haven't used, you know, because I was a workaholic that I only had for that year. Unfortunately, I don't know what I was thinking. I only had 15 days off because I was always at work. They always called on me and depend on me. And I realized, how can others depend on me when I can't even depend on myself? And let me start taking care of myself and telling people, like, hey, I need some time off to recharge. I need some time off to do things that inspire me to go. And that I discovered this, and this is my passion of assisting others.
Thank you for sharing that, Herbie. Because when we do feel burnout, and it's just like when you have a cut, you put a Band-Aid over it. When we're experiencing burnout, you need self-care. And sometimes that looks like taking time off from work. So it is okay to take time off and to take care of yourself. You've been wonderful. It's been an absolute pleasure hearing from you today. And thank you so much for being a beacon of hope in our community. Thank you, Herbie.
Thank you.
To help us all cope, last year we offered free Cope Notes to all participants. Cope Notes is a way to get daily texts that can be affirmations or practical life tips. They were so well received last year that we are doing it again this year. I'm sure some of you have already signed up. So for the first 300 people to sign up, you can scan the QR code or click on the banner below and go to copenotes.com/redeem and use the code JWB23. This will get you an annual subscription to Cope Notes. So you'll see it at the bottom, and you will also see a banner at the bottom left where you can sign up for free mental health first aid certificate. This could be mental health first aid for youth or adults. This free certificate is through SPC. You can scan the QR code or click on the banner. I'm going to go ahead and share one of the Cope Notes texts I got last night, so you kind of know what it's about. My text says, it's okay to excuse yourself. Get a glass of water, wash your hands, stretch. Walking away, even for a minute, gives you time to hit the reset button, which I'm sure we all need here soon. All right. I can't believe we're already at the end of our morning. The time has just flown by. I hope you all have enjoyed the presentations and all of the connections so far. Before I announce our fabulous challenge prize winners, a couple of final things I'm going to go over. All the resources within this link or your app for the conference will stay up on the platform for your reference for a year from today. You just need to log back in like you did today, and you can access the recording from today, resources, and connect with other attendees. Like previous years, we have a short evaluation for you to complete. These are really important as it helps us design future sessions. So please take a minute or two to complete our evaluation. You can click on the banner below or scan the QR code to complete the evaluation. I will also put it up when we close out of the live stream. So I'm going to share my screen now to announce our challenge winners. Let's do a little refresh and see where we are at. All right, let's look at the leaderboard. Robert Sumner, you are our #1 challenge winner. While some of the points, I mean, a lot of people have the same amount of points, but it's first come, first serve. So Robert, you did a wonderful job putting in all of the challenge words and collecting them, along with goodies. You just won a What's Your Superpower training by Fiona Potter. This will be for all of the staff at your site. I'll be in contact with you and I will help you get that organized. Our second challenge winner is Jessica Nicholas. And our third is Brittany. I'm scared to pronounce that, but you can see it up there. Brittany and Jessica, thank you so much for competing today. You are winning a goodie bag that I will drop off to you at your center after the conference. All right. On behalf of the Juvenile Welfare Board, keep up the great work and continue to use those superpowers for good. Stay mission focused and be vigilant when it comes to the children we're serving and their well-being. Thank you to all of the speakers and attendees who have been so active throughout the morning. We will see you next year.